Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dance NYC Fieldwide Call. My name is Melinda Wang, and I am the Research and Advocacy Manager at Dance NYC. I'm joining from occupied Lenape and Canarsie land, also known as Brooklyn. I am a Chinese American person with short, kind of bright red dyed hair. I'm wearing a black button down, and there is a blurred white background behind me. I want to note that live captioning is available today. Our captioner is Nicole from the Viscardi Center. You can use the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen to view the captions, and we've also dropped the link in the chat to access the stream text transcript. So the Fieldwide Call is a space for the dance community to gather, to share resources, and to collectively act on pressing issues for the future of dance in the NYC metropolitan area. So today, with all of you here, we will be doing a budget testimony workshop. The hopes is that we can all be equipped with the tools that we need to advocate for just funding, better funding for our dance sector. Um, First, today, to walk you through what we're going to be doing, we'll be doing some grounding for today's conversation. Then we'll go over a very quick City Budget 101. And then after that, we'll be going over how to testify. So we'll do some level setting together, and then we're going to do an activity in the breakout rooms where people have the opportunity to play kind of a testimony Mad Libs to practice kind of what goes into a testimony. Um, so if you're here, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You can put your name, your pronouns if you like. If you have an organization that you're affiliated with, you're welcome to put that. And it'd be lovely if you could share just one thing you'd like to learn today, so we can have that in mind. Please note that we are recording today's call, so if you have any questions or concerns about that, you can direct message Nadia on chat. All right. So before we get started, I'd love to go over some guidelines for the space. So a general note for accessibility. Um, we'd love it if you could please be clear, loud, and maintain a moderate pace while speaking, both for our captioner and some general understanding. Housekeeping elements, please stay muted if you're not speaking. If you are speaking, please introduce yourself and your organization. And if you're on camera, you can share a short visual description for accessibility purposes. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat, raise your hand, or unmute and share. And for like any individual questions or concerns, you can direct message Nadia on chat. So if you have tech questions, anything like that, accessibility, anything like that. I want to go over community guidelines for today. The first is by participating in this event, you're entering a virtual space of learning and accountability based on Dance NYC's values of justice, equity, and inclusion. That means we agree to share our opinions respectfully and course correct if harm is caused. We agree to honor everyone's humanity and to not tolerate speech that is disparaging, abusive, or violent. If anyone acts in violation of these guidelines, they will either be asked to course correct or be removed. So thank you all for your collective agreement. We would also like to give a short land acknowledgement. Dance NYC would like to recognize our country's history and its legacy in the space we occupy. Parts of this acknowledgement have been adapted with the guidance of Indigenous dance artist and activist Emily Johnson, and more recently, River Whittle. Dance NYC would like to acknowledge that the city of New York is located on stolen land, more specifically, Lenape the traditional territory of the Lenape people, who are also recognized federally as the Delaware Nation of Oklahoma in Anadarko, Oklahoma, Delaware Tribe of Indians in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, Stockbridge Munsee Band of Mohican Indians in Bowler, Wisconsin, and in Canada as the Munsee Delaware Nation in Munsee, Ontario, Delaware Nation in Moraviantown, Ontario, and Delaware of Six Nations of the Grand River in Oswego, Ontario. The Lenape people are the original inhabitants of this land and gave Manhattan Island its name, Mannahatta. We recognize that as an organization based in NYC, we have benefited and continue to benefit from the systemic displacement and subsequent erasure of Lenape people and governance on their land, and must make concerted efforts to collaborate and make pathways for Lenape artists and leaders to return to Lenape-Hoking today. So please join me in taking a moment to recognize and reflect on the centuries of violence, displacement, forced migration, and settlement here, and consider what reparations you can begin to make today. All right. I want to offer that one place we can begin is by supporting Lenny Lenape Exquayoc. which is a group of Lenape matriarchs from five of the federally recognized Lenape tribes who are working to increase Lenape presence on Lenape land, both immediately and long term. So we dropped the link to their website in the chat. I would encourage people to explore their resources, donate if you can, and support in other ways. Cool. So now that we have some of that grounding, I wanted to start by talking about what we're talking about today. So today's Fieldwide Call is about equipping the dance community with the tools to advocate for our New York City dance. So the Our New York City Dance campaign, we run it every spring and summer. We had a launch event earlier in the March, and we work to mobilize the dance community through this campaign to act on the policy issues as well as the day-to-day practices that can make our sector more equitable and livable. So when we launched the campaign in March, we decided to focus on four general areas of advocacy priorities. The first is just funding for the dance ecosystem. The second is fair pay and protections for dance workers. The third is dance education for all. And the fourth is affordable living and working space for dance. So if you want to get more involved with the campaign in general, there are two things that you can do. The first is you can go to our campaign website, and there we've compiled a list of easy actions that anyone can do from their computer to advance these priorities. The second is that you can join the Our New York City Dance Action Crew, which is a group of dance workers committed to advocacy that makes our field thrive. So for today, by building advocacy skills for the city budget, we're going to be focusing on the first of those four priorities I named, which is just funding for the dance ecosystem. Just funding, what we mean by that is that we want to make sure that, it's not just one dance worker, one dance company, or one presenter that has enough, that we want to make sure our whole ecosystem, across boroughs, across neighborhoods, has what it needs to survive and to thrive. So in order for us to work towards that, we are preparing you all today to testify for just funding. One of the most powerful tools when it comes to advocacy is testimony, right? This is one of the few chances we get as like everyday people, everyday New Yorkers to directly, face to face often, tell our city council members what we need and what we care about. So we're going to get more into how to give testimony later, including a activity in breakout rooms. But first, I wanted to do a quick 101 on the city budget process. So I'll pull up some slides for it. So for this section, we're going to be using presentation slides. For a visual description, the main format of the slides includes title slides with a purple to orange gradient and large white text, and as well as content slides that are white with pink headings and black text in bullet points below. Images and any other visual content on the slides will be described as we reach those moments. Currently on screen, we have a gradient title slide reading City Budget Process 101, or just City Budget 101. All right, so the city budget process happens every year and it determines funding for all city services. That includes things like how much funding goes to schools, how much funding goes to parks, and also, of course, the culture. So when it comes to the cultural budget, a lot of times what we're focusing on is the Department of Cultural Affairs, or DCLA. DCLA is the city's cultural agency, and it provides funding and resources directly to cultural organizations across the city. This funding, it really matters, right? The dollars, they go directly to our community. They work to pay artists, they work to pay administrators. And one thing, that I think about when it comes to the city budget is it's also about making an important statement, right? It's often said that a budget is a moral document. Public funding for the arts makes an important statement that art is a public good, that what we all do here, that dance, that making sure that people have ways to engage with their bodies, engage with the cultures that they come from, is something that everyone deserves and should have sustainable public support to make that possible. So the process happens in three stages, which is on the screen right now. It's a slide. There's a purple flow chart split into three sections to represent the three phases. The first is the preliminary budget phase. So usually in January or February of every year, the mayor releases a preliminary budget proposal. So this is the mayor's kind of preliminary first proposal that is going to be the basis for the rest of the budget process. Then the city council holds hearings for the public to respond, as well as other opportunities for public input. And based off of that public input, the city council releases their preliminary budget response, which responds to the mayor's budget and proposes their own. After that, the mayor takes that response, works on it some more, looks at other projections, and releases the second proposal, which is called the executive budget. Then again, there's another phase for the public response, usually with hearings, other opportunities. And then after kind of that period of public input, the mayor and the city council come together to negotiate and finalize a budget deal for the year by July 1st. So I want to talk about where we are in the process this year, which is now kind of indicated on the screen by a purple arrow. So right now we are at the end of the first phase, awaiting the second phase. So the City Council released its preliminary budget response on April 1st, and we are currently awaiting the executive budget. So a bit of context on what's kind of happening when it comes to budget advocacy this year is that one of the key defining issues when it comes to the budget this year is the city's budget deficit. So the city has a budget deficit that has had estimates really ranging from 12 to 5 billion. Lately, it's been more on the 5 billion end, but it is a large deficit. And there are a couple of ways that the city has been thinking about how to cover it. The mayor's proposal has hinged on increasing city revenue, namely by trying to get more money from the state or trying to raise taxes on the very wealthy. And those are both things that require the governor's approval. The city's preliminary budget response tried to figure out a way to do this without raising taxes. So what it did was try to re-estimate some of the savings and the revenue that the city can make from existing sources. And this move is something that the mayor has criticized as unrealistic, as being as overly blue sky about what savings and revenue could be. So right now we're going to see how that comes up within the executive budget. In terms of what city budget advocacy has looked like around culture, a lot of cultural organizations have united around a central number ask, which is a $30 million increase to the baseline for the Department of Cultural Affairs. And the City Council included this $30 million ask in their preliminary budget response. Okay, so that's a very quick basic budget 101. I'm going to pause to make sure there aren't any questions on that before I move on. Okay, great. So let's talk about how we can give testimony about the budget or about other issues. So I know the prospect of giving testimony can feel intimidating. So I want to welcome in the range of relationships to giving testimony to the city council. So I'm gonna ask people to drop pluses in the chat if something applies to you. So get your typing fingers ready, or however else you access the chat. So if I could get a plus in the chat if you have given testimony to city council before. Yeah, I see a couple pluses. Great. So I'm seeing pluses. Some of these are oral, some of these are written. Yeah, and I'm hoping that you all feel like you can share a little bit about your experiences with people in breakout rooms, whether that's written or oral, or about things that you felt have worked or haven't worked. Can I get a plus in the chat if you've never given testimony to City Council? Yeah, I see that that's the majority of people that are kind of chiming in are people who haven't given testimony before, which is excellent. You're in exactly the right place. Um, can I get in the plus in the chat if the prospect of giving testimony makes you feel a little bit nervous, which I know that it can make me feel nervous. Yeah, we're nervous as a people, as a group. Totally. It can be a little nerve-wracking. What about if it makes you feel like really excited? You're like, yeah, I'm doing my civic duty today. These city council members are gonna hear me. Yeah, oh, a lot of pluses. Okay. Okay, a lot of people are not excited at all, and some people are super excited. I love that for us, right? So these are all things that can be a part of our experience when it comes to doing this process. I find that oftentimes the biggest barrier is like the nervousness or the excitement or kind of the emotions that we're bringing in with us. So I want us to give us the chance today from that range of starting points that we have for us all to strategize together about how we can show up for our community, the dance community, arts community, other communities at City Hall. Testimony, it's just that. It's about how we can tell our stories, how we can tell our community stories, and how we can really talk to the legislators who make decisions that impact our day-to-day lives. And the testimony can really actually make a difference, right? So, an example is that for the past couple of years, the City Council preliminary budget response has always included the direct number ask we've given at council hearings. And having more people show up to these hearings shows our legislators that this is something that we care about as a community, that the people want culture, the people want the budget to reflect the needs of the people. So there are three ways to give testimony, which we'll show on the next slide. Um, if, the first is to testify in person at City Hall. So advanced registration here is optional, but it is recommended. The second is that you can testify over Zoom, and to that you have to register online at least 24 hours in advance. And the third is to submit written testimony, and you can do that up to 72 hours after the hearing. So for all of these, they have to happen via the online registration form. Like I said, with the exception of testifying in person, but I still recommend you do it. So I'm going to share my screen and take us there now to guide you all through what the registration form looks like. Great. So I want to, is my screen visible to people? Great. Okay, we are right now on the City Council hearing testimony registration page. If I'm looking to the side, it's because I switched to my second screen. But it's a mostly white web page with black text and blue buttons. So I am going to scroll down to this section. The first thing you do is you select how you'll be testifying. So for this example, I'm going to select testifying in person. You fill out your name, your email, and your phone number. I'm going to put in a fake one. Y'all don't need to know that in terms of what my phone number is. And then you select the hearing you have. So this is why it's important to have kind of the committee and the general date and time details for which hearing you're going to. Later, I'm going to show you how you can find hearings yourself in the hearing calendar, but no, for the budget hearing that's coming up, we will be notifying people about all of this information. So let's say that I want to testify at the Cultural Affairs Committee hearing in a couple of days that is going to be on Capitol. And then I'm going to put in the subject of testimony. So it can be anything. Obviously, what your thing is. So in terms of the budget thing, I might say increase funding for the Department of Cultural Affairs. And then organization, I could just put self, or if I want to put an affiliation, I can put other and put an organization. And then the last thing you can do is upload your testimony here. So if you are giving written or Zoom testimony, I do recommend that you write out what your remarks will be ahead of time, and you can attach them there here to submit. Or if you are giving written testimony, you can just submit it here as well. And that's all you need to do if you're submitting written testimony. If you are submitting Zoom testimony, then what will happen is that after you submit this, then you will get a Zoom link. Day of, what I would usually do is have the Zoom playing in my background during the public testimony time while I'm doing the other things, and then wait for my name to be called and join. I will note that most of the time they tend to give Zoom testimony later in the day. Like usually they call people who testify by Zoom last. So if you are testifying by Zoom, I would anticipate that most of the time you'll be testifying later on in the afternoon. Okay. So that's what's going to happen for written or for Zoom. If you are testifying in person, I'll take you through what happens next so you know what to expect. So I see something in the chat. Let me just check. Okay, that's just Nadia. I just want to check if there were questions. Um, if you're testifying in person, I would recommend the first thing you do is to verify the hearing location and agenda. Again, for the budget, we'll send that out ahead of time, but I want to make sure that you all have the tools to find this yourself for any other kind of advocacy issues you want to get involved with independently. So the first is you need to go to the City Council hearing calendar, which I'm showing now. It's mostly white with kind of a neon green and gray table with all the details. If you just Google City Council hearing calendar, it'll bring you here. But we also dropped it in the chat. So there are several columns. Um, and on the very left, it gives the committee name, and then after that, it gives the date, the time, the location, and then the meeting topic. So when I'm trying to find a meeting, then usually if I know the date, I'll go by that. If I know the committee, I'll go by that. But for today, I'm actually going to take us over to the second page to the preliminary budget hearings, which already happened. Yes. So usually what I'll do is I know that often when it comes to cultural testimony, I'm looking for the Committee on Cultural Affairs. I'm going to right now Control F Cultural Affairs. And over here, I'll see preliminary budget hearing, cultural affairs, libraries, and international relations. When it comes the next time to testify, the thing that it'll say there is executive budget hearing. So if I go to the left, I'll see the hearing date, the time, as well as the location. The location is always either going to be City Hall or 250 Broadway, which is across the street from it. And then what I like to do is I like to check the agenda by clicking here. It'll download a PDF. I'm going to open that up. What you'll notice here is there are two times, one for libraries, one for the Department of Cultural Affairs, and then a public testimony time. These first two times are for the agencies themselves to testify and receive questions from the City Council. And the third is for public testimony, which starts at 1:30 on the schedule. So that's why I like to look at the agenda because oftentimes the time for public testimony doesn't start until hours after the start of the testimony at the start of the hearing, and I don't, always have all day to sit there and listen to what's going on for the libraries and the agencies, although that can also be helpful. So I would recommend seeing this and coming shortly before the start of public testimony time. I will say that sometimes things can run over or behind when it comes to hearings. So this is all, the schedule they have here is all with a grain of salt. It honestly, it takes the amount of time that it takes. Okay, I will stop. Actually, let me ask if people have any questions about the technical aspect of this before I stop sharing. Cool. Okay, I'm gonna reorient my Zoom screen for a second because it did that thing where you stop sharing and then everything gets messed up and you can't see anyone.
Well, Melinda, I was just gonna make a note about the in-person when you arrive there, just a little off script. Just from my experience, also arrive early because there's a lot of folks there and they might put you in another section if you arrive late. So just saying that if you feel like you really want to be present and just arrive early. That's all.
Totally. Thank you, Raquel. Okay. In terms of what actually happens day of, first you kind of find your way to the location. Um, you will have to go through security to get into, and I see in the chat I recently submitted testimony to the email. That's fine. That works great, Lily. Thank you for the question. So first, you're gonna show up at the hearing location. You're gonna have to go through security, so please be prepared for that. And you may be asked to show ID. Then you make your way to the hearing room. Something that I want to make sure that people know is that when you arrive there, you will have to sign up in person, even if you've registered online. So usually there's a desk right after you enter the doors. So there you have to sign up in person in order to have your name called. Usually in the run of the day, like I said earlier, first the city agencies go, and then it's public testimony time. Depending on how many people are there, how the order gets called, you might wait anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours to testify. It can depend on the hearing, how well attended it is, how much of an issue that people are showing up for is. So I would, make sure that I try to have a good amount of my day blocked off in the afternoon to testify. I know for the cultural affairs budget hearings, those usually end around 4 or 5 in the day. But for example, the education hearings tend to be quite long because there's a lot of students and parents and teachers who show up for that. When you get called up, there will be a microphone for you to speak into, and you will have 2 minutes to give your testimony. So those 2 minutes can go pretty quickly. which is why I recommend writing your remarks in advance and practicing it to give the timing right. And then one thing I know for myself is that I can talk a little fast when I get nervous. So since I know that I might be nervous, I would have put a plus in the chat for that section. Then I purposefully try to slow down my sentences. At the end of the 2 minutes, you'll hear a few beeps, and then they typically, let you finish up your last sentences and you're done then. The city council members might ask you or other members of your panel questions after you shared. And then after that, you're done. You can leave after you're done testifying. You can stay and hear what other people have to do. I will say for me, I can often find this process really incredibly satisfying. It can be like a really good experience to come together with other community members, hear about their experiences, and really have an experience where like you are listened to and where you have your experience heard and recognized. Okay. Any other questions about like logistics before we move on? Excellent. So I want to go into what makes an effective testimony. So I tend to think of this in four parts. The first is who. So it's who are you? You can introduce yourself. What is your connection to the issue if you have expertise on the issue? The what. What is the problem we are looking to solve? Like what's going wrong in the status quo? What does the city need to pay attention to? The why. So it's why should they care? What's the impact of the issue? Why should the legislators listen to how important this is? And the how, which is your ask to the city council. What should the city do to solve the problem? And I'm highlighting your ask because that can be a really important part of it. They want to hear concrete solutions from you if those are available. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide where we'll have some examples of what that might look like in an issue where we're talking about parks. So for the who, an example of this might be, my name is Leslie and I'm a parent living in Queens. I take my kids to the neighborhood park multiple times a week. So who are you? Like the neighborhood I'm living in, the connection to the community, and why this issue impacts me, why I care about it. So the what is the problem. So an example here might be the restrooms aren't regularly cleaned, meaning my kids don't have a hygienic space to relieve themselves, and the swing is faulty, causing safety concerns. So oftentimes this is a good opportunity to educate your council members about what the issues you're seeing in your community are. Oftentimes they might not know about the bad swing, right? We got to make sure the swing works for the kids. Um, Next slide, we'll go over kind of other examples about the why. So what's the impact of the issue? What's going to happen if the swing doesn't get repaired, if the restrooms aren't cleaned regularly, right? An example of that might be that my kids need a safe place to play. When they have time to play, I notice they perform better in school, have more stable moods, and sleep better, right? So why is the right to play for children? Why is the right to parks important? And it's that it has these impacts on the holistic health of a child, the holistic health of the children of your community. And then you're asked to the city council, what should the city do to solve the problem? So here an example might be to increase parks maintenance funding. I might have a specific number ask if I've, coordinated with the organization. So it might be by $15 million and hire more custodial staff to make sure that, issues are getting resolved. Okay, so I want us to be able to look at a video example of this. So we're going to play a video of Lisa Gold, which is our friend at the Asian American Arts Alliance, testifying at the most recent cultural budget hearing this March. So as you experience this video, I want you to pay attention to where these four parts, so that's the who, the what, the why, and the how come up. So I'll play that now.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. And members of the council, thanks so much for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Lisa Gold, and I'm the Executive Director of the Asian American Arts Alliance, or A4, and a member of the Cultural Equity Coalition. We are a 40-year-old, or for over 40 years, A4 has worked to ensure greater representation, equity, and opportunity for Asian American artists and cultural organizations of all disciplines. The only organization in the country that does this. But I want to start with a question for you. Can you name a famous Asian American?
Lucy Liu.
Excellent. So you are actually better than 42% of Americans who couldn't even name one.
Met oh my gosh, who's the artist that did the Louis stuff? Isn't that
The
the Asian
Louis?
artist to Murakami?
Oh, Takashi Murakami?
Yeah, isn't
Yeah.
that
Uh-huh. Yeah, Japanese
Japanese?
American. Yes, there you go. You're two. And like, but you know what most people said? Most people, they say Jackie Chan, who's not even American, and Bruce Lee, who's dead. Okay, so this isn't just about celebrity, though. It's about visibility. It's about belonging, and ultimately, it's about safety. Because when communities are unseen, they're often unheard and underserved. So that's where culturally specific organizations come in. So organizations like A4 create spaces where artists and cultural workers of color are not only supported, but deeply understood. We build community, provide resources, and create pathways to opportunity so that the stories shaping our culture actually and accurately reflect the people who live here. And yet, at a time when the federal government is actively rolling back equity efforts and private funding is shrinking, our city has to step up, not step back. Instead, we're facing a lack of transparency and persistent inequity. So, based on DCLA funding information that I found and I dug up, AAPI organizations receive roughly 5% of CDF grants, already below the share of the population that receives grants. But even more concerning, those grants are on average 23% less than the normal grant. And with no dedicated AAPI-led or serving CIG, less than 2% of cultural funding is allocated to our community, despite representing 18% of the city population. So that gap is not just a number, it's a lost opportunity and it's silenced voices. So culturally specific organizations like A4, LXNY, and the LGBTQ Museum are essential infrastructure. We ensure that artists can thrive, that our communities feel seen, and that New York City's cultural landscape reflects its true diversity. So I join my colleagues in supporting the sector-wide ask to baseline and incrementally increase the $30 million in arts funding and to take meaningful steps towards equitable distribution across our sector. Because when you invest in culturally specific organizations, you're investing in a city where everyone belongs. So thank you.
Yeah, can I get a virtual round of applause for Lisa Gold? But in terms of, some of what I talked about in of the four parts, we saw that in Lisa's excellent testimony, right? So the who is Lisa Gold, Asian American Arts Alliance, the only organization of its type that's serving and developing Asian American artists. The what we see very clearly what the problem is. There's lack of representation for Asian artists. That cultural funding only goes to only 2%, I think she said, of cultural funding goes to AAPI organizations. And then the why should they care? The impact. She talked about visibility, about safety, about how these are important parts of cultural representation of for New Yorkers and across the country. And the how, she asked specifically about the $30 million increase and also equity in distribution, about funding culturally specific organizations and making sure that BIPOC communities are getting equity in their piece of the pie.